Okay, welcome to this section 12 Anthology analysis in A-level religious studies Buddhism of Rahula's Bodhisattva ideal in Buddhism section 12. Let's read it, then we can analyze it. Further, Asanga says that when a Bodhisattva finally attains enlightenment, Bodhi, he becomes an Arhant, a Tathagata, a Buddha. Here it must be clearly understood that not only a Stravaka, a disciple, but also a Bodhisattva becomes an Arhant when he finally attains Buddhahood. The Theravada position is exactly the same. The Buddha is an Arhant, an Arham Samsam Buddha, an Arhant fully and perfectly enlightened Buddha. Okay, so let's get into this. Why Asanga says, it says here, well, remember how you are persuasive in an Eastern culture. It's by quoting authority. And this is a rhetoric tactic to argue from his enemies, his competitors' own authorities. We've seen that time and again in this extract that we're reading. In what sense and how is Rahula redefining terms, and why is this important? He says, when a bodhisattva finally attains enlightenment, he becomes an Arhant, a Tathagata. I'll come back to Arhant in a second. Well, Rahula uses this point to begin to switch out the word bodhisattva gradually in this text for Buddha. And these are not synonymous terms, not the same in the way that he seems to want us to believe they are. And in the following passages, he will reinforce this with appeals to how Theravada and the Pali canon of the Nikaya period Buddhist texts say this sort of thing. How would Basham argue the emphasis on getting to Nibbana is changing in early, even immature Mahayana? So, just to stick with this, an Arhant, a Tathagata, when he's saying, Asanga says, when a bodhisattva finally attains enlightenment, Bodhi, he becomes an Arhat. What's going on here? Is this an accurate reference, or is this taken out of context of the development, the evolution of theory, doctrine in Mahayana? Well, remember, Asanga is writing at a time that you might call a mature phase of Mahayana doctrine, a 3rd, 4th century text. His Abhidharma Samayukya that he claims he's got by religious experience from Maitreya. And any goal of final enlightenment of all beings is kind of receding into the distance. It's certainly there in early Mahayana thinking, but it's being subsumed, eroded by the idea of the Trikaya doctrine, which not only put enlightenment in either impossibly far into the future, mystically into the future, to be of no real significance, but it would even go further and suggest, Yogacara would suggest, that the aim to get to Nibbana in itself is a delusion, a dualistic object-subject idealistic delusion. Sponberg says the samsara and Nibbana, along with, he's really quoting Nagarjuna, in Mahayana are coterminous, and this reaches its height in the thinking of Yogacara. Why even bother getting to Nibbana? Yes, the Stravaka aimed at becoming a Bodhi awakened, and like perhaps the historical Buddha became thus gone, or at least appeared to be thus gone. That's all that Mahayana might later say, to Nibbana. But this is not what Asanga is teaching. He taught that Tathagata Garbha, not quite Buddha nature, but luminous mind, is possible to achieve a sort of idealist subjectivism, subject, object, all is in the mind, chitti matra. That's the goal. Now, so what does Rahula think must? It must be clearly understood. Why does he say this? Well, anytime someone uses the word must, be careful. It's a form of coercive, not persuasive speech. It's not an argument. It's kind of bullying rhetoric, and we have little reason really or argumentation other than Rahula's claim, "Trust me, because I would like you to think this." But we don't have to think the way that Rahula claims we must think. Um, so, what is, later he says, Buddhahood? That not only a Stravaka disciple, but also a Bodhisattva becomes an Arhant when he finally attains Buddhahood. And is that actually what Asanga would say? Well, it probably is, but a Bodhisattva attains another kind of Buddhahood. You've got to understand Buddhahood is an umbrella term for the goal or the teleos or the end of the Buddhist. And there were at least 3 different ends or goals in mind. So Rupert Gethin, in his Foundations of Buddhism, says Buddhahood is the state of an awakened being who, having found the path of cessation of dukkha, well, that sounds a bit Theravada, maybe. The cessation of dukkha, suffering as created by attachment to desires and distorted by perception, that's a bit more Mahayana, and thinking, is the state in the end of no more learning, a very Theravada idea. But there is a broad spectrum of opinion on the universality and method of attainment of Buddhahood. Is it just for a few, the elite, as Theravada would say? Is it for everyone, as Mahayana would say? Certainly it depends on Gautama's teaching, but should they be interpreted literally or metaphorically? For example, the Buddha nature school, the Tathagata Garbha Sutra that emphasizes Buddha nature, that's a form of enlightenment in Mahayana. So is achieving a compassionate mind, a mind that is filled with compassion, something that Yogacara certainly would emphasize as well. So is, as Rahula claims, the Theravada position exactly, the Theravada position is exactly the same? Well, as we've seen, it just isn't. This, Basham would point out, is to muddy the waters with the lack of clear, defining terms. Yes, they're both aiming at Buddhahood, but what they understand by Buddhahood is very different. And Rahula muddies the waters by assuming a Theravada understanding of Buddhahood and obscuring, eclipsing a Mahayana understanding of Buddhahood. So what is an Arhant? Arhant. The Buddha is an Arhant. Is he? An Abram Samasam Buddha, an Arhant, fully and perfectly enlightened Buddha. Well, what does this exactly mean? This is in fact a sort of confession, a Theravada confession of faith, a projection onto the historical Buddha, an act of Theravada faith that no Mahayana could or would say. Bhikkhu Bodhi, in his text Arhant's Bodhisattvas and Buddhas. As a fellow Theravada monk to Rahula has a similar view, citing the Pali Canon, where the Buddha is claimed to have said, I am an Arhant in the world. I am a supreme teacher. Well, is that all what an Arhant means? Supreme, a teacher. And then later, the whole Buddha formula, he quotes from the Pali Canon, the Blessed One is an Arhant, a perfectly enlightened one, possessed of true knowledge and conduct, an exalted one, a knower of the world, unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed, teacher of devas and humans, enlightened, the Blessed One. Well, the Theravada position is exactly the same. Is it? Listen to this claims of originality and authority. The Buddha was an Arhant. The Bodhisattvas, like the Buddha, become Arhants. This is slippery language, claims to originality, or claims, authoritarian claims you should be somewhat dubious about. Okay, so this was section 12.